Afternoon, folks. Thank you. So this is my story as to why I chose to serve in the United States military. It's titled Cap Guns, War Games, and the Sandbox. Some of my fondest memories growing up started early on summer mornings in Pennsylvania. By 8 a.m., my brother and I were already outside running around the yard with our toys and knocking on our neighbors' doors to gather our friends. Our typical companions were G.I. Joes, toy airplanes, plastic guns, baseball gloves, and anything else we could find to keep ourselves entertained. We played every sport we knew of, climbed trees, built forts, played in the sandbox, and eventually turned games of hide and seek into small contests of war. Our range covered most of Lakemont, from Logan Boulevard to the park, all the way up to Frankstown Road. It's not much ground to cover now, but it was our neighborhood and we knew every inch of it. Though I didn't understand it yet, many of us had the influence of those who had served in the military. Pictures of our family members in uniform hung on the walls of our homes, such as photos of my Uncle Michael in his dress blue uniform. My family had a long history of military service. My grandfathers and great-uncles all served in the military during World War II. My Uncle Mike and my Uncle Bobby both served in Vietnam. With that kind of influence, it was no surprise that I found myself hanging out with other friends and cousins who loved to play rough, get into fights, and play games of war. We would usually gather at my buddy Petey's house and consolidate our collection of toy guns, knives, plastic helmets, and uniform items. In a pre-op meeting, an argument broke out between Petey and I as to whose character was going to be the best warrior. I proudly stated that I was going to be a Marine because they were the best, and Petey strongly argued that he was the best because he was an Army Ranger. We would both later enlist and serve in the Marine Corps and in the Army. As we grew, so did our fascination with war and our family history in the military. I still remember watching coverage of the first Gulf War on television with Tom Brokaw. Our cap guns soon evolved into paintball markers, and we were now engaged in full-scale paintball battles around sections of woods in Altoona. Instead of fighting afterwards, we would meet up and have campfires in those woods. That's when we first started talking about it, the war we all knew was coming. We had a feeling we would end up in a war just like our family did before us, and on one of those nights, bullshitting beside the campfire, I knew that someday I was going to join the military. I wanted to be a United States Marine. That realization materialized on September 11th, 2001. I was on my way to my second period class when I heard teachers talking about how a plane had hit the World Trade Center. When I got to my classroom, it was empty. Everyone was in the digital media room watching news on the television. I walked in and stood in amazement that a plane could hit one of those buildings. It was then I noticed another plane headed towards those buildings, only to witness the second plane crash into the tower live on TV. I didn't need anyone to tell me what was happening at that moment. I knew it was the start of the war me and my buddies had been talking about. When I went to Slippery Rock University that next fall, it felt like I was going through the motions. Combat operations had already started in Afghanistan, and the invasion of Iraq was starting. Although I was doing my best to focus on going to class, track practices, and study hall, my mind was elsewhere. A few of my buddies had already enlisted right out of high school, and it wasn't long until stories of combat operations were coming home. By my second year of college, I had friends who were already hurt or killed. Going to class was a waste of time because I didn't want to be there anyways. I dropped out of Slippery Rock in the spring of 2004, worked in the summer at Charleston, South Carolina, moved back home, worked for a few months in Altoona, and then went to the recruiter's office one day that fall. I told the recruiter, Staff Sergeant West, that I wanted to enlist. He said that was fine, but first I had to take the earrings out. Once I cleared the military entrance processing station and entered the delayed entry program, things moved quickly after that. The opportunity to leave the next week came during my first meeting, and rather than waiting until after Christmas, I took a bonus and left that week. Marine Corps basic training is true culture shock for anyone who has ever had the audacity to get there. Nothing can accurately explain the intricacies of how everything you do there has meaning and purpose. There is no secret, however, that purpose is to train you to become a United States Marine. When I got to Parris Island, I had not touched a firearm in several years. However, once I was issued my M16 and began my training on how to properly carry and use it, I realized my childhood toys had been replaced by serious tools. We spent over a month learning close order drill and the proper manual of arms before we even started learning how to aim our rifles. It all seemed like pretend up to that point, almost like we were still playing war games as kids. It hadn't hit me yet that this was real and I was headed to war. The first time I was on the range to zero my rifle was when that reality set in. I remember being given my rounds and told to load my magazine. We were broken up into small groups called sticks and arranged in front of at least 100 targets. I was somewhere in the middle, and either side of me lay about 50 other recruits. We were given the command to load and make ready. Upon command, we were told to fire. That initial roar of gunfire was the most amazing and frightening thing I had ever experienced up in my life at that point. I had never had anything like that happen. So I laid still, aimed, took a deep breath, exhaled, and squeezed the trigger. Bang. Wow, that was kind of awesome. I took 4 more shots and followed the command to unload and show clear. As we stood up, I looked around and noticed the recruits beside me all had the same grin on their faces I did. We walked down to our targets to check our groups, and just about an inch or two below where I was aiming was a tight little group where I hit. After a few adjustments and rounds of fire, my rifle was zeroed and so was I. I shot expert at boot camp. My career moved forward. Life had a way of showing me the games I played as a child ultimately shaped who I became as an adult. The war games and hide and seek were now real life missions. And instead of my buddies playing bad guys, insurgents were waiting in their favorite spots to ambush us. The sandbox that my brother and I played in as kids was now Iraq, which was fittingly also called the sandbox. The toys I once carried around the neighborhood were now tools of my trade, and I was dressed like a G.I. Joe. When people ask me why I joined the military, I can't think of any other way I could have existed in my skin had I not. It's in my blood, it's in my DNA, my family history, and in my dreams. The games I played as a child evolved into the life I live because that's who I was always meant to be. That is why I served.